Hello, my name is Antonio Valente. For 25 years, I've been working in financial services as a trusted resource to help individuals, families, and companies create and protect their legacy. Now, as I said last time, most people think being a financial advisor is about stocks and bonds, but those are just tools in our toolbox. My experience that most successful people are driven by living a life of purpose, and that's the secret ingredient in creating a legacy. So gear up, friends, because we're about to climb the legacy summit. Friends, thanks for tuning in. This is episode 2 of the Legacy Summit. Emilio, they said it wouldn't last, and here we are, my friend. I'm just kidding. Nobody said that. But as a reminder for our first-time guests today, yes, I'm a financial advisor. We're in Dallas. We're servicing clients across the country. But this show, again, is not about investing. It's not about stocks. It's not about money. It's about living a life of purpose and my conversations with individuals and organizations that are legacy-driven. I have a saying, when intelligence speaks, honor it by listening. And when I think about my 25-year career and all the companies across the country that I've serviced as clients and all the leaders that I've worked with, my next guest is easily part of the top 1% of those leaders. So who do we have with us today? Mr. Ken May. Ken, welcome to the Legacy Summit. It is so great having you today.
Hey, I'm Antonio. It's so great to see you, and thank you for that kind introduction. I'm a little bit. I think you need to upgrade your guest list.
Well, I tell you, the first thing I got to do is get you a Dallas Mavericks shirt. Okay, that's object number one. But we'll revisit that later on in the show. Okay.
No way, no way.
Ken, let me take a quick minute to share some of your highlights, some of your street cred, if you will, with our guests. And with your resume, it's kind of hard to figure out where to start. And I used to say the beginning is a good place. Okay, so from hub operations at FedEx, right? Your talents and skills found you as SVP, Senior Vice President, U.S. Ops, leading 62,000 employees, 1,500 facilities in all 50 states. FedEx buys Kinko's in 2004. You become Chief Operations Officer for a couple of years, eventually becoming President and CEO of the organization until 2008. Krispy Kreme needs some help. You become President, COO, responsible operations in 21 countries. A few years later, another great opportunity comes along, this time with Topgolf. You become COO there and eventually CEO, redefining the term explosive growth with 10x revenue growth, along with expanding the employee base from 2,000 folks all the way to 14,000. And something that I want to circle back a little bit later in the show is that you also served as chairman, board of trustees for the March of Dimes, which of course does amazing work to improve the health of babies, preventing health defects associated with premature babies and infant mortality. Ken, that's a whole lot.
Yeah, it is. It's like I got tired just listening to that. Uh, it just. I guess to recap it, it shows I can't hold a job. Uh, that many positions, but no, I was blessed to work with some incredible people over my career, as well as some incredible brands, and learned a little bit along the way about what not to do and what to do, and we're able to kind of mix all that together to create Topgolf, which is a pretty explosive growth company, but more importantly, a company everybody wanted to work at, nobody wanted to leave. So it was a pretty good deal. And I'm still out there slugging away at a few things, but nothing as hard as any of those. So no heavy lifting going forward.
Well, I'm going to help with some heavy lifting here today. I got to tell you this story. So driving into the studio today, I passed 2 FedEx trucks, and I'm like, "Hey, Ken, how you doing?" Right? So like when you're driving around town and you see a FedEx truck, do you kind of smile to yourself, or you're like, "Hey, I have a part in that."
I do. I take great pride in it because FedEx, turned me into the leader that I am today. But it drives my wife crazy because having had all of their trucks and airplanes reporting to me at one point, I'll be driving down the highway and I'll see one and it'll be dirty or it'll have a tail light out or something like that. And I'll make a comment. My wife will go, "You didn't work there in 15 years. And you're still working there." So, but I do take great pride in it. It was a great experience. And I was very, very lucky, very blessed to work there.
I love that. That's stewardship and that's leadership encapsulated right there. Hey, Ken, let me start at the beginning, right? So you're in Tennessee, you finish up school, and I know you were with UPS for a bit, but when you moved to FedEx, you didn't really intend to go down that path at first, right? Is that right?
Oh, not at all. I thought I'd probably end up being in real estate in some capacity, but I was lucky enough to I had to pay for my own college at Memphis State University, and got a job unloading packages there. And next thing I know, they moved me into management at 19. I was a supervisor there for a couple of years, and then this small company called FedEx called, and I was still a senior in college, and I thought that I interviewed with them, and somehow I got the job. So at 21, I'm a senior in college. I'm a manager for FedEx, making $1,890 a month. I thought I was rich. Somehow finished college, and then the rest is history. 13 promotions over 25 years, and luckily to move into every area of the company. And so I tell young leaders that you don't need to know a lot about anything. You need to know a little bit about everything. And that's because I moved around so much, I was able to gather that wisdom and that experience.
I love that, Ken. I really do. I love that because you really have to know, like the business world has just changed so much. The dynamics have changed and they continue to change so rapidly. Knowing something about everything is critically important. So you got like 12 years, various management positions at FedEx, and then what I call the big leagues, right? The SVP level, FedEx Air, Ground, and Freight. You're now in charge of 21,000 folks. Eventually, SVP US Ops, 62,000. What's the toughest part of a successful transition to senior level management?
I found it quite easy because I had so many great mentors around me that were able to coach me in it. I was always not anymore, but I was always the youngest guy in every room, right? I was always 10 years younger than my peers. And so they looked after me like I was a kid and taught me the ropes. But I found it came natural because, I guess one thing we didn't talk about in my background was, I grew up in a kind of not a tough part of Memphis, but kind of a below average part of Memphis. Yeah. And so I got used to dealing with kids from the inner city. And then I was lucky enough in my high school years to go to a private school. So I was able to operate in both worlds. And so I was comfortable sitting down at 5 o'clock in the morning, talking to 150 FedEx couriers over donuts at 5 a.m. I was also comfortable in the boardroom and knowing which fork to eat with at dinner that night. And so those skills were portable. But the biggest adjustment I would say is on the communication side. Being able to pull everybody in the room that works for you and to communicate with them versus having a distributed workforce. And I was blessed at FedEx. We had a television network, so I had FedEx Television, and I used it exclusively to talk to everybody. We were able to take a big company and act real small, where everybody felt like they knew me, even though they'd never met me. And that TV network was a big deal. So communication, I would list as one of the things that's important when you're making that transition.
Ken, I love that. You said something so powerful is that, I know a lot of folks, out there, if they're watching CNBC or if they're, seeing something, they always must think like, oh, it must be great to be the CEO. But it's been my experience that the CEOs and the C-suite level, they're the first ones in the office and they're usually the last ones to leave. And so I don't always think that the general public fully appreciates the weight of responsibility that it takes to run an organization, and an organization as dynamic, as FedEx. How did you prepare yourself like each day to go in there, whether you were in the office or traveling around? I think you traveled half the year to all the different states. How did you prepare yourself daily?
Yeah, it was one of those things where you had to take care of yourself from a health standpoint. So I tried to eat healthy, of course, take my vitamins, and I was a big runner, so that got rid of some of the stress. Yeah. The biggest thing was emotionally, because I felt like I'm a big cheerleader to everybody. And so the ability to pump up a group of people. So I had a FedEx airplane assigned to me and I went to 2 cities a day sometimes. And you'd meet with 300 people in one city and 300 people in the other. And you're trying to touch everybody in the room and make them feel important, because they are important. But I just felt like I was giving. And so then you get back home and you just want to shut it down. So getting my rest too was a big part of that. But it was a big juggling thing. I mean, one thing I would comment on everybody thinks that being a CEO is so glamorous. Everybody says, well, man, that's great. You don't even have a boss anymore. It's like, no, it's worse than that. I got like 8 to 10 bosses, and they all want different things. It's called a board of directors, and they all want different things. And and there's politics involved and all kinds of stuff that I really just didn't have a lot of patience for, because I just want to do a good job and treat people right and show up on time and pay my taxes. And that political stuff is a part of the job I hated.
Yeah.
I just despised it.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, in a lot of ways, it's almost like you got 62,000 bosses, right? Because you're responsible for all these lives out there. I mean, it's great.
One other comment I'd say, we talked about communication and using that TV network. It was always funny to me because I was on there all the time talking to my employees, that I'd be like in Manhattan walking down the street with somebody in a FedEx truck would pull up, and I'd say, hey, watch this. And the courier, who I've never met in my life, would get off the truck. I go, hey, what are you doing? He goes, Ken, how are you doing, man? And so, this just yesterday on LinkedIn, I got a note from a FedEx courier that I've never met. He lives in Orlando, Florida, and he sent me a note. He said, Ken, you must come back as soon as possible. We need you. and I hadn't worked there in 15 years, never met the guy. I just sent him a note and said, man, I'm sorry you are going through that, and I'm sure things will improve. Hang in there. But that the ability of using communication tools to touch everybody is really important.
Well, Ken, that's legacy is what you've created. I mean, that's really what we're talking about, today on the show. So let me tell you this, and it's going to sound kind of funny, but I need to tell you this. So when I think of FedEx, I just think of life, and it sounds kind of funny, but just hang with me for a second, right? So in the offices, right, like the FedEx offices, you've got, folks making important documents, people picking up business supplies that they need to operate their businesses. But when I think about the delivery system, I think about life. I think about Christmas gifts. I think about commerce. People are trusting, FedEx and organizations like that with very, very important stuff, and it needs to be there when it's supposed to be there. So I got to ask you this. I kind of think of Tom Hanks sometimes in Castaway, right? And he does such a great job of showing how important the FedEx community really is. And when I think about that last scene, when he shows up and delivers that package, I mean, I'm getting chills just talking about that. What does that feel like when you're seeing like your organization on the big screen? What does that feel like?
Well, it was interesting that when that movie premiered, FedEx was leery about getting involved with it, but because of that last scene, we were worried about the plane crash. To be honest with you, because our pilots and we didn't like that image, but we were able to work through it. I think they took them 3 months to shoot that scene with Robert Zemeckis and Steven Spielberg and one of our pilots working nonstop around the clock to get that done. But that end scene was pretty special because it just said what we were all about, which was. It's the FedEx Purple Promise, make every FedEx experience outstanding. And that's what we tried to do. And so I took great pride in that. When that movie first came out, my wife and I, it was our last date night before we brought my daughter home from the hospital. And she was in NICU for 9 weeks. So it was pretty important to, this was our last date night before we went to get her at the hospital. And I was running FedEx's global operations control centers around the world at the time. And my wife, I had a beeper at the time, and I got beeped early in the meeting, and I called somebody on my flip phone. And then, because this job is always 24/7, 365, there's always something going on in the world.
Absolutely.
And so then I get beeped again, and I make another phone call. And the movie starts, and it's Tom Hanks in Russia, standing up, yelling at couriers, and a countdown clock.
Yeah.
And, I got beeped again, and my wife looked at me like she was really bothered, and she elbowed me. She goes, look at this TV, or look at the screen. I go, what? You look at the screen. That's you. And I was like, what? And I was living out that scene in the movie right as we were sitting in the movie watching it. And so there's another anecdote. If you will ask me, do I own Wilson from Castaway?
Yeah.
I will answer that.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Ask me if I own the ball Wilson from the movie Castaway.
Do you have that ball?
Well, if you go on the internet and Google who owns Wilson from Castaway, it will say that I paid $18,500 for the ball at an auction in Dallas, and it was in my office. I'm not going to say whether it's true or not. I'm just going to say that there's articles, I think 5 or 6 articles been written about about the ball and me and where the ball's been as far as traveling around with my career and things that happened to the ball with me. And so I get calls a couple of times a year from people want me to talk about the ball. I got an interesting call from a Dallas radio station wanted me to bring it down to the studio because Tom Hanks was in town promoting a movie. They wanted to do an on-air reunion with the ball.
Wow.
So maybe I own it or maybe I don't. I'll just leave it at that.
All right. Well, look, I'm going to try to arrange me, you, and Tom Hanks. Excuse me, the four of us, me, you, Tom Hanks, and potentially Wilson. I'm going to try to do something with that.
I'll go to Dick's Sporting Goods and get a ball and
you already read my mind. That's what I was going to go do.
I'll dress it up. I just can't wait to see you get Tom Hanks. So.
And so Wall Street, in our firm, Baird, right? I mean, we looked at companies like FedEx to gauge the economy. I'm sure you know this, but, the day that the news broke that you were leaving FedEx, the stock dropped 2% like immediately. You know that, right?
Yeah, but it probably went up 5% the next day. So I wouldn't. Fred Smith has built an army of great leaders, so they're going to be fine. Don't worry about them. But leaving there was bittersweet. It hurt me quite a bit. I had a strategic difference with my boss, and I couldn't work there anymore. I just disagreed. I couldn't tell my people that the things we were doing were the right things, and I think I was subsequently proven right by that. But anyway, it's not a big deal. Fred and I are still friends, and I still hang out with all my FedEx buddies every day of my life here in Memphis.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Hey, I know, you talked about this earlier in the show, but since the years that you've left FedEx, you still get messages. You got one last night. But to me, this just says a lot, right? We're talking, it's not like you just left 2 months ago. It's been a while. There's a Forbes article about you, how you would handwrite cards to, FedEx team members that, if they were getting married or if they lost a loved one. It just says so much about who you are as an individual and the type of leader that you are. I would say that some folks in our group, in our collective group, we would say that you've mastered the skills of EQ, which is emotional intelligence. Can you talk a little bit about EQ and how important you think that is? And is that part of your leadership style?
Yeah, it's interesting. First of all, those little small things like those little cards, I used to send out like 30 or 40 a week. Those little small, that's a lot of time. I did it over many, many years. So there's thousands of those cards out there. And, hardly a month goes by where somebody won't send me a note, with a picture of it. The card I sent them back 20 years ago saying, you're the person that reached out to me when I lost my mother or whatever. And I saved it. It's one of my prized possessions. So those little small things are really, really important. And so I was blessed to have, parents that were, that taught me the right way. EQ though, I moved up very quickly at FedEx in management, and I was given a speech in the mid '90s. I don't remember when. And at the end of the speech, somebody said, "Why do you?" They asked me a question. Said, "Why do you think you're successful?" And I just stood there and looked at them and looked at the audience, and I go, I don't know, because I've had bad grades in high school, bad grades in college. I always worked 2 or 3 jobs. I was buying houses in college. So I was a little entrepreneur. But that being said, if we took an IQ test, you're going to double me. I guarantee it. And I'm going to be proud of that because I'm probably going to stake your girlfriend at some point. So I'm kidding. But anyway, about a week later, I get a book sent to me anonymously saying, "This is the reason you're successful." And it was the original emotional intelligence book. And so I got to page 10 and I go, gosh, I get it now. And it really is a skill that my mother had. It's the ability to touch each individual that you're speaking to on their own terms, finding out what they need and really actively being intellectually curious with everybody, not judgmental, just intellectually curious. There's a great scene from Ted Lasso when he talks about don't be judgmental, be curious. It's a Zart scene. I encourage you all to watch that because I think it's priceless. You probably YouTube it, but
I watch it with my wife. We love that show.
Yeah. Emotional intelligence is all about touching each person that you're talking to and be genuinely not faking, but be really being interested in them and caring about them. And that's the reason I've been able to, leadership is sometimes is a burden because I've got people from 40 years ago still call me for advice. That being said, I consider it the ultimate compliment that they do that, and that burden is not something that I dread.
I love that. I love that. Ken, I want to transition some questions to a company that put a bunch of cool things together and combined them into one. Okay, so I want to talk about Topgolf, right? Food, fun, drinks, and golf. Right, so you come in, you're COO, and then less than a year later, you're now the CEO of the organization. So same level of responsibility, of course, but this is a completely different type of organization now, right? When you get there, Topgolf really wasn't that known, and it's really you and your team that spearheaded that explosive growth story there. So the skill sets required of running a mature business, I feel like, is so different than running a growth stage company. And you were successful in both. Can you share a little bit about that dichotomy?
Yeah, I had to morph my skill set and to totally reinvent myself. When I was a FedEx executive, I fired people for too many 2-minute flight delays, right? I mean, that's how precise we were in running that business. I had, 3 assistants, a jet at my disposal. I had 20 suits and 200 ties.
Right.
And so I thought I was important, but I wasn't. I'd sit in meetings all day, back to back, listening to PowerPoint presentations, and go home at 6:30 and think I'd done a good job. Krispy Kreme was a different type culture, so that's the first time I really tasted something that was just radically different.
Right.
And then I go to Topgolf, and it's like, okay, well, their culture is not totally set. It's a work in progress. And so I was able to take all the good things of the FedEx culture that I loved, combine them with the loosey-goosey part of being in the entertainment business. That, because at one point, people think that, Topgolf's a new company. Topgolf is an old company. It's like 22 or 3 years old, I think. Started by 2 brothers arguing about whose ball was going further on a driving range. And they they said, let's put a microchip in the ball. And the other one said it didn't work. So they took the ball, bought a pet collar, took the chip out, put it into the ball, and then took it down to a police station and used a PET scanner, and it worked. And so that's the history. So they thought they were in the practice business, and so TOP stands for Target Oriented Practice. And so we morphed them, and it wasn't just me. I mean, it was a lot of people working side by side with me. We morphed them into an entertainment company, and it changed how we hired, what kind of buildings we designed, what kind of uniforms we picked out, how we trained, everything. And so, taking some of the good things from FedEx I learned, we were able to implement those. There was a lot of logistics too. We went from, hiring relatively no one to hiring, 4,000 people a year, to going from building 1 of those a year to building 10 of those a year. Yeah. It's a complicated process to spool up that fast. But, I've been blessed at FedEx. I'd opened up 600 Kinkos in 2 years. So I knew how to go fast. It's just a logistics issue, and if you know how to do it, you know how to do it. And I was blessed with that, to have that experience. And so, but I did morph myself. I went from those 20 suits and 200 ties to I went to work with my baseball cap turned backwards. I bathed at night. I had on shorts and flip flops, and there was 2 beer taps in the lobby, and we sometimes at 4 o'clock somebody walk in with a beer and say, you want to talk for a few minutes? And I would sit there and think, man, at FedEx I would have fired you so quick for doing this. Right. But I had to morph myself. So I became the world's oldest millennial. I pretty much managed the company from my phone, just as I'm doing today, because I can't operate my laptop. But, you just change. And so I'm a millennial now. I'm surprised I've stayed this engaged on this video this long. Normally you got about 7 or 8 good minutes with me, then I'm out thinking about going fishing or something.
You're doing great. You're doing great. You're on minute 22 and you're doing great. All right. So seriously, you're a proven skill, one of many. You're just adaptable, right? You're adaptable. The times are changing and you're just adaptable, and you've always been able to stay ahead of the curve. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break right here. When we come back, we're going to continue the conversation with Ken's legacy. We're going to go a little bit beyond the world of business. So please stick around with us at the Legacy Summit, and we'll be right back.
Experience. It makes all the difference. The Penn Valente Group has decades of experience in navigating clients through various market cycles since the early 1980s. We have the experience investors need to help make the right decisions when it matters most. We invest our time in building strong relationships with our clients. This leads to better outcomes for our clients. Investing for the long run is the right advice, but it ignores basic human nature. The fear and greed cycle leads investors to buy high and sell low. We help our clients become informed investors by maintaining the highest standard of care with consistent communication regardless of the market's direction. We act as the voice of reason with realistic expectations for how markets actually behave. Over shorter periods, market returns have a very wide range of results. Over longer time periods, outcomes tend to center around long-term averages. History matters. We don't panic during times of market stress. Big drawdowns in the stock market have been a common occurrence, and we understand that's typically when our clients need us most, and the manifestation of our work together will likely be most evident. We prefer preparation over panic and understand that though diversification is key, it is also hard. Why? Because true diversification means holding underperforming assets. If everything is working, it means your portfolio is not actually diversified. With the knowledge of behavioral biases such as loss aversion, we understand that losses are more painful than gains are pleasing. The math behind diversification makes sense, but its psychology can be troubling. Experience. It makes all the difference, and that's peace of mind for our clients when it matters most. Give us a call at 214-373-2925 or find us online at PennValenteGroup.com. Let's see how our experience can help you better achieve your goals and enhance your family legacy.
Okay, friends, we are back. And thanks so much for sticking around for part 2 of the Legacy Summit. We're here with my good friend Ken May. We've been talking about Ken's incredible legacy in the for-profit business world. But though I mentioned it earlier in the show, I wanted to circle back to the nonprofit side of Ken's legacy. And Ken, I'm talking about the March of Dimes, and you served 2 consecutive terms as chairman, National Board of Trustees, and I know you have a personal connection to the March of Dimes and the amazing work that they do. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, the personal connection comes from my daughter was a preemie. She was born at 2 pounds and fought for her life. There were a couple of times we were worried we were a loser. And so she spent 9 weeks in the NICU. And so got thrown, my wife was barely showing, and suddenly we were in the hospital 4 times a day, scrubbing up to go in and spend time with her. But, she had a great experience out of there. She, is 22 now and a beautiful senior at SMU and doing very, very well. But and so the March of Dimes originally reached out to me there just in Memphis, where I was a FedEx executive, and said, "Would you tell her story?" And so I'd go out speaking for them occasionally just to tell her story. And the story makes everybody cry. Yeah. So it was easy to tell, and I'd lived it. I'd earned the right to talk about it. And then they asked me to join the board, and I said, "Oh gosh, what a great honor! The National Board of Trustees, that's a big deal, because it's kind of a who's who on that board."
Sure is.
And so I joined it, and then when I became the CEO of Kinko's, I called and said, "Look, I need to rotate off. I'm not going to have time to do board work." And they said, "We're going to give you a year off." And I said, "Okay, I'll take a year off." And they called me back a year later and said, "Look, we not only want you to come back, we want you to chair the board." And I was stunned. I'm like, gosh, I don't know that I want to be a part of an organization that would have me chair the board. I was like blown away by it. But anyway, it was a great experience. I served 4 years in that capacity. And, the people I met, from, visits to the Oval Office a couple of times, to White House Christmas parties, to Jonas Salk's son, to, FDR's home in Hyde Park. Right. It was just an incredible experience. And we raised a lot of money and did a lot of good work. And then after 10 years, I rotated off the board. And so now I'm just a volunteer. And but the March of Dimes is a great organization. And, I got more from that experience than I gave, which is bizarre to me.
I love that.
Because, I didn't earn any money for it. It was just, my time invested, but I sure got a lot out of it. So it was a great experience.
Yeah, I love that. And they're doing amazing work. And, we're both dads, and, we think about our families first in all that we do. And so, it always stood out to me as something just enormous in your career of what you've done. And it's helping kids. And I'm sorry, but that always comes first, in my opinion,
Yep.
So Ken, let me transition, right? I want to switch some gears, and I want to do what I call kind of rapid fire leadership, okay? Because here's what's happening. The next Ken May is out there watching this today, okay? I don't know if they're in college. I don't know if they're middle management trying to become senior management level, but they're out there, and I think they're going to learn more listening to this show today than they might in a senior level managerial course at university. So to be a successful leader spanning decades of transition, I said this earlier, I'm going to say it again, you need to be adaptable to change. So my first question on that is, what is your superpower?
People skills, the ability to relate to each individual on their own terms every day of my life.
I love that. I love that. What do you look for when you're building a team, right? What are you looking for in those team members?
Yeah, I'm looking for somebody that not only is smart and competent in their capacity, but somebody that is a team player. We at Topgolf, we prided ourselves in hiring a select group of people, and you could come to our office, and it was interesting to watch too, because like I'd hire somebody, let's just say they were over HR, and I'd tell them, I said, look, I don't expect you to know just HR. I expect you, if you have an opinion in finance or legal or whatever, I expect you to come out. I said, because we never know where the good ideas are going to come from. And so we took great pride in that. You come to our meetings and you couldn't tell who was in charge. You could not tell. Because, I tried to be the last one to speak like the Japanese do, right? CEO's the last one to talk.
Right.
Sometimes because I talk too much, that's not the case. But I just recognize that my opinion sometimes can trump other people's opinions. And I wanted to make sure that everybody got their ideas on the table, and it worked. And then the last thing is, we spent a ridiculous amount of time setting our culture at Topgolf, and we use Team Track, which is an outward bound ropes type course, leadership course up in Northwest Arkansas. We probably sent 50 groups of people through there to really live the culture. We recognize people off the culture. It was a pretty remarkable experience.
I love that. You've said the word a couple of times. It's such an important word. When I think about our own team, our own operations, my partner Brian in Baltimore, when I think about what we wanted to create when we first built the team about 6 years ago, was it needed to have the right culture, right? The culture of client first, the culture of true relationship based. I feel like culture is part art and part science. How do you think culture plays in today's world? Things are happening so much faster than they were 20 years ago, or 25 years ago when I started. How important is culture today for the future of success of a company or an organization?
I think it's everything. That's where I start. I don't start coming up with some grand strategy on how to expand or how to make an acquisition. I start with that. That's the basic building block. And you have to get that right. And you have to make sure people are living up to that every day of their lives and of their careers. And so, I was blessed to grow up in the FedEx culture. I did not design it. I lived it, grew up in it, and hopefully maybe I enhanced it a little bit. But then when I got to Topgolf, it was like, okay, we have the chance to set this culture. And we spent a lot of time off-site doing that. And, my goal going into that was I want to create the type of company I want to work at. And that's what we did. It was a fun place to work. It used to blow me away. I'd go out to dinner, a business dinner, and forget something at the office and run back by. It'd be 9:00, and the office would be packed, people playing ping pong. And I'm just like, what in the world? Why don't y'all go home? They just loved being there because it was so much fun. And one other thing I'd tell you is that, we used to have these leadership breakfasts every 2 weeks at Topgolf. And you started off, there was only 30 people in the room. And when I left, it was like 250 people. But you could just tell the camaraderie and the love. And I used to tell the team, I was like, you guys need to look around, okay? Because in a few years, you're going to be talking about the good old days. These are the good old days. Make sure you're savoring every second of what you have here. I said, some people go a whole career and never experience this. I said, I've been able to experience it twice with FedEx and Topgolf. And you have an opportunity to just savor it. And now the Topgolf people that are still there and ones that have left will text me, man, you were so right about the good old days. They're gone. And I was like, well, the companies change. They have to. New leaders come in with their own approaches, and not that they're bad. It's just they change.
They change. Right.
But culture is everything.
I love that. Ken, there's so much there. I love that. I love that. Oh, I could do a whole show just on what you said right there. Hey, Ken, tell me this. So in my world, a rite of passage, so to speak, is successfully navigating clients through market environments that are less than ideal, like the way they are right now. Call them tough times, bear markets, what have you. What's the rite of passage, or is there a rite of passage at the C-suite level, and what would that be?
Um, you know, you stumped me on this one. You finally got me to where I
I
don't have
got
an
you.
answer. Uh, I don't know. It's interesting. In your business, it's all about relationships,
It
and I
is.
really feel that in the businesses I've been, it's all about relationships,
Yes, sir.
and that ties to the legacy thing. Like, what do you want people to be talking about when you're 80 years old? You want them to be talking about the things that you did for them individually.
Yeah.
And so, but as far as rite of passage, I don't know. You stumped me.
All right. Well, we'll come back to that. We'll come back to
Okay.
it.
All right.
So successful people learn from others, right? And obviously, I'm going to say family plays a huge part in this. Actually, today is my wife's birthday, so I have to do a shout out
Happy
for my
birthday.
wife. That's right. Thank you. Thank you. So, Ken,
And
let
your
me ask you,
moms.
is there anyone that you would like to give a shout out to, family, support folks, people that were along the way that, you don't do this alone? Who are those individuals that you'd like to give a shout out to?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. I mean, I guess first and foremost would be Fred Smith. I mean, he was like a father to me, and he built a great company, and he built it the right way, and he modeled the behavior that I was able to use both at that company and other companies. My dad, of course, because of his work ethic. My mom, because of her people skills. She never met a stranger, and she made everybody feel funny, feel special, and she was really, really funny. Self-deprecating type humor that I was able to inherit. Those would be the three, I guess,
Yeah.
that stand out. Of course, my wife for encouraging me all the time to, she wants me to slow down, and it seems like I keep getting more and more business projects. So,
Well, hey, that's funny because I wanted to talk about that. So I want to transition. I mean, you serve as an advisor for a lot of different organizations, and there's a lot, but I've just pulled a handful. We can maybe just chat, give a minute, talk about these things. Talk about Jump Shot. What's going on in Jump Shot?
it's a cool company. I mean, we're in the venture stages, but it's Topgolf for basketball.
Wow.
And two young men off the West Coast had approached me and asked me to help them, and I agreed to help them. And then after I got involved, I got excited. So, we're past the seed round. We're moving close to starting our A round. But two cool kids, I think kids, they're 30 years old, but two fine young men that are keeping me young, working with them side by side. So that thing has legs.
I love that.
It's amazing the NBA players have jumped behind it. A lot of people in the hip hop community have jumped behind it. And these young men have incredible success of reaching out to really, really famous people and then calling them back, which I never thought was possible. They do it by reverse looking up people's phone numbers.
Oh, wow.
And then, I mean, I'll tell you one quick story. Is like they called me one day all excited. He said, "You're never going to believe who we heard back from." I said, "Who?" And they said, "Jeannie Buss." I'm like, "Jeannie Buss that owns the Lakers?"
Yeah.
Oh yeah, she's helping us. I'm like, "Oh my God, you guys are amazing." Because I wouldn't even think to do that. But they don't know that they're going to get told no some, but they keep doing it. So I'm excited about that one though. I really am.
Let's talk about Etsoma Reads. This is a pretty cool app, right? It's helping. It's about reading. Talk a little bit about Etsoma Reads.
Yeah, that's a new one that I just got involved with about 60 days ago.
Okay.
And literacy is a big deal, especially post COVID, because kids that were in kindergarten, first and second, pretty much missed 2 years of school.
Right.
And the ability to teach somebody to read remotely is hard.
Yep.
Families were going through all the difficulties that they went through, and so we literally have a couple of years of kids that don't know how to read. I'm on a board of a private school here in Memphis, and we had to move a bunch of people, turn a bunch of people around down for third grade because they couldn't read at a second grade level.
Goodness.
And so this company goes right at that issue. They have an app and the ability for the kid to put in a network their friends and families that they might want to read to. So dad's on a trip, you can read to dad just by clicking on dad's picture. There's Aunt Martha, there's your grandmother, there's your favorite neighbor. You just put them in there and the kid can click on who they want to read to. And so As the kid is reading verbally, there's voice recognition that catches it, and if the kid uses the wrong diction, it stops. Or if the kid struggles, it stops,
Okay.
and it won't highlight that word, and it just stops there and says, "Okay, now let's go start with the pronunciation, and then let's move on to what it means, and let's use it in a sentence. Okay, now start the paragraph over, and you move through that so the kid's learning." And so right now in public school or in schools in general, they're sending kids home and saying, "Hey, read 20 minutes a night." So they come back to school the next morning. The teacher has 30 kids or 20 kids, however many are in the room. They have no idea who read 20 minutes. They have no idea.
Right.
And so the only way they can tell is to start getting the kids to read out loud so they can see who's catching up and who's not.
Right.
Well, with that summit the next morning, the next morning teacher comes into work, she just turns it on and she has statistics right there in front of you and says who read, who didn't read, and
Amazing.
specifically who had struggled with which words, so she knows what to tailor her lessons for that day. So pretty amazing deal. We're past the C round. We're moving into the A round.
Last one. Tell me about swing.
Yeah, swing is cool too. So pickleball is hotter even in the Memphis Grizzlies, if that's even possible.
Yeah, right. I know it.
Swing is a big deal, or pickleball is. And so swing goes right at that, and it's the Topgolf for racket sports. And so we're going to lead with sports. It's just not pickleball. It's pickleball, it's tennis, and then it's padel, which is a sport coming from Spain. It's the fastest growing sport in the world.
Wow. Okay.
It combines all three of those with a killer design, a killer food and beverage, killer retail. And so our first location we're hoping is going to be in Raleigh, North Carolina. We're past the seed round, moving into A. We've got the debt lined up. We're trying to line up the equity. I'm supposed to have a call with them tomorrow to get updated, but that one, the pickleball is just exploding. There's not enough courts. There's too many people.
Yeah, you're right.
And so this goes right at that, but it'll be the country club for racket sports, and we're excited about it.
Yeah, no, that's great. And pickleball is so huge. I mean, even our own organization, Baird, is a big sponsor of pickleball. So Ken, we're having a great conversation here. We've talked about a whole bunch of different things. I feel like I've asked you a million questions, but is there one question that I didn't ask that you wish I did ask? And if so, I'm going to ask it now.
Yeah, it starts right there.
I see it.
I wish you would ask me if the Grizzlies going to win the NBA championship.
Yeah. So, look, I know you couldn't make it to Dallas today, and that's okay because we've got it on the calendar. Mavericks, Grizzlies, and I'm sorry, my friend, I'm wearing my Mavs hat. That's what's just happening, okay?
Well, I sat in right behind T. Morant, which is John Morant's dad, and two very famous rappers, Yo Gotti and Moneybagg Yo. You might want to come with an armed guard and not with me if you're going to wear that Maverick hat. Because Luka will fake a pulled hamstring or something so he doesn't have to play against us. I can feel it coming.
You see it coming? All right. I pick up the tab, okay, no matter what, if that's what happens, because then you're a seersayer, okay? A soothsayer, all right?
Yeah. Well, remember it's Memphis, so don't run your mouth too much because we shoot our 9mm sideways. So
no, I'm kind of a short guy, so I'm going to be real good. I might wear a Mavs shirt underneath a sweater. How's that? Okay.
Yeah, that's more appropriate.
Ken, you're the best, man. I really appreciate you. I can't thank you enough for making time today to be on the show with us here today on the Legacy Summit. It's an honor to have you a guest on our show. It's a privilege of mine to be able to call you a friend.
Well, you're awesome. Thank you for having me. I'm I consider it an honor to be on your show, and hopefully from now on your guest list will only improve from here. So.
So, well, I appreciate it again. We are out of time today, folks. And again, my name is Antonio Valente, and I'm a financial advisor here in Dallas. We service clients all across the country. And if you'd like to be a guest on the Legacy Summit or need assistance with your family wealth planning or corporate legacy, please reach out to us. We would love to have that legacy conversation with you. Legacies are made and protected with intentionality and purpose, and that is what our team stands for. Thank you, and God bless.